Hello and welcome to the Holographic Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Tone D, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kyle the Salty Dog. Hey Kyle, thanks for joining us today.
What's up, Antoine? Happy to be here.
All right, happy to have you. So today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about a variety of issues, and this is our first podcast. So this podcast, the Holographic Podcast, we're going to be talking about a variety of issues, a lot of different topics, and we're going to try to do it from a perspective of a deeper level of reality. Sometimes that's going to be difficult, but we want to look at things from a unique perspective, from a different perspective, and we're just going to have fun with it. So hopefully you join us and have fun and maybe learn something, maybe not, but we'll see. So first, we're going to start out with talking about the nature of the universe, a very light topic to start. I think the nature of the universe is important to think about, not only from a physics perspective or a scientific perspective, but from a perspective of individuals who are trying to negotiate through a difficult world or a difficult time. If you can understand the nature of the universe, you can understand your own nature better, and you can, so to speak, vibe with the universe a little bit better. I know right now a lot of us are stressed out, and maybe if we understood ourselves and our surroundings better, we could be a little less stressed out. Maybe, I don't know. Kyle, what do you think? You going to be a little less stressed out?
I'm always trying to be as less stressed out as I possibly can. I'm luckier than others in the sense that I don't have a lot of outside stresses in my life. So I realize that that's a big sort of positive for me. I wanted to ask you a quick question, and just going back to your sort of definition of the holographic universe or those theories. Is there any wisdom or utility, let's say, for somebody maybe to think about that as a broader question, the holographic universe and varying perspectives, but maybe apply it? What I'm asking is, can you apply that in a smaller way? So instead of thinking of the universe in your standard scientific universe, which is this thing that's very cosmos driven, stars, planets, and beyond, can we think of universe? Is it possible for people to think of universe as a smaller thing, like a smaller sphere of influence, so that it's more tangible, manipulative? You can manipulate it easier. That's
Absolutely.
Just a question.
Absolutely, great question, and that's 100%. That's 100% yes.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why I like the holographic model. So, in string theory and in the nature of the universe, where you have the models of the large models for the planets and the stars, and you have the small models for the microscopic world, for the quantum realm. Those require a lot of mathematics, and I'm a layman. I can't do all those mathematics. I don't know all those mathematics. And so like string theory, they can only prove it through mathematics. And there's certainly mathematics for the hologram theory, but I don't know the mathematics. So the book, there's a book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, and he doesn't put any mathematics in there. He's a layman as well. He includes physicists like Bohm and another guy, Pegram, who is a scientist. So the holographic theory is very accessible to the average person, and there's a lot of things that you can personally do to think about some sort of proof or some sort of way that it comes in contact with you directly. So let me just give a brief synopsis of the holographic model. So in the holographic model, there's an explicit reality in which we see and we perceive and we look and we smell and we taste and we touch things. And then there's an implicit reality, which can be made up of light and energy and vibrations. And that implicit reality is something that we have a difficult time perceiving And so our brains, our monkey minds, have created this explicit reality of solid things and things that we interact with our senses. And the reason that they use a hologram as an analogy is because a hologram is created from an implicit reality of information made by lasers, and then it creates an explicit hologram that can be projected somewhere. So it's just an analogy. It's not a perfect analogy. It's not saying the universe is a hologram. It's saying a hologram is the best analogy to think about the universe. So it's our minds take this implicit reality of light and energy, and because that's difficult to deal with, we've evolved to make it easier to deal with, and we've created this reality that we see around us. So one thing that you asked about how that can that can be tangible to individuals. So a hologram, a true hologram, there's basic holograms you can buy at the store that you move around. Those aren't true holograms. That's a toy hologram. A true hologram you have to create with a laser and you have to project. So a true hologram, any part of that hologram, when you project it from the laser, if you took that information and you cut it in half, it would still project the entire hologram. It would just be a little bit weaker. It wouldn't be as clear. If you took a quarter of that holographic information, it still projects the entire hologram. It just is a little bit less clear. So that's one example. That's one part of a hologram that's very interesting, that one part of a hologram projects the entire hologram, no matter how many times you cut it in half. It's hard to explain right now. You'll have to read up on it, but that has to do with the human body as well. So in Eastern philosophy and in traditional Chinese medicine, you have your whole energy of your whole body, and you have your different points of energy through your body, right? So those whole points can be found throughout the whole ear, and they can be found throughout the hand, and they can be found throughout the feet. And that's related to different things when masseuses and acupuncturists, they use just part of the ear to influence your whole body. They use just part of the hand to influence your whole body. They use just part of your feet. And so that's related to our human body. It's related to our larger universe. You see cycles in the entire world. So when you look at something small, and then it looks like the cosmos, right? You look at a small projection of something, or something in a wheat field, or in a river, and it looks like the cosmos. So that is one example of interacting with reality in a holographic way, that no matter what you do, no matter how you divide up our reality, it reflects and is a part of our larger reality. And
could you say that maybe a way to for people to access maybe examples of this sort of holographic universe, or the varying degrees of it, would be to look for repetitive patterns? So for example, you were sort of exhibiting the idea of looking for something in a wheat field and then seeing it someplace else. I know that for myself, I've always been amazed when you look at patterns in nature. So like the spiral of a nautilus shell or a snail shell, and then sometimes seeing that in other places. Where would that be? It could be the movement of water, that's still nature. It could be the spiral galaxies above our head. Or another example would be like looking at the way that your veins and your arteries, like if you see a chart that diagrams the intricacies of the veins and arteries, and then you look at a close-up of a leaf and the way the leaf's little strings go through it, they're very much like they're super aligned. So, I mean, would that be a way for people to kind of access maybe a little piece of that, or am I just like making up something?
No, that's absolutely a way that they can access a piece of that. And it's a good example of how our universe can be, and again, this is a theory, so I'm not saying that, oh, this is 100% and I believe it and I'm going to fight until I get my way. All I'm saying is I think this is an interesting theory and I vibe with it. It intuitively, it makes sense to me. So
I agree. The one thing I would also add is, and this is sort of on a more of a larger question of human nature, I've always wondered why humans, at least modern humans, let's say, have not necessarily vibed with those patterns that you see in nature and instead of trying to emulate them, we've often sort of like built things that are anti. So in other words,
right.
you look at, instead of dividing up things along natural water courses, often we make straight lines across them. If you look at a skyscraper, it goes straight up and it's magnificent. The engineering is incredible. I'm not downplaying that, but you look at things in nature and they're not built in the same way. I've always been fascinated by the modern science of what they call biomimicry, which is, I think, should be pervasive. It should be in every little bit. A good example of that is Nike, I think, made a swimsuit for their professional swimmers that took some of the science behind shark skin and they put it into their swimsuit to make their swimmers faster. Like, why have we not been doing that from the dawn of the modern era? You know what I mean? That's a question I've always had. It's like people try and make these things and they're so human and so, in a way, alien. They're opposite of nature. It's something I always thought that we should be striving to go more towards, is like looking at the most miraculous bits and pieces of nature's technology and trying to mimic it. And I've just always wondered why people are not more immediately recognizing these patterns. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you see something like that, if it's a building, if it's a piece of architecture, or if it's a piece of technology, and you see how it does vibe with nature and you say, wow, this is really interesting and cool and it could be useful. And so that intuitive connection with that, I think, is very important. That's something that some people have lost, but some people recognize. But could it be that when we don't have that, when we've rushed to make technology not vibing with that, is that something that has to do with profit? Is it have to do with certain people in power trying to push a certain push a certain I don't know, I struggle to say, what's that?
Agenda?
Yeah, agenda, good. Yeah, exactly. Push a certain agenda. So I think that may have something to do with that.
Either that, or it could be the fact that we're idiots.
Idiot. It could
be. I mean, why do we keep on building in floodplains?
Idiot.
Idiot. I mean, it's like, anyway, that's a different story, but.
We'll talk about that on another podcast, but certainly I think that is a good example of the holographic nature of the universe, is that there are these connections where you can see these things and they do have to do with each other. Now, is that in the implicit reality, in the reality of light and energy, everything really is connected very closely. So in the explicit reality, our brains see these connections and say, wow, this has to be connected. And so to me, intuitively, I think that the implicit reality where everything is very closely connected, we say, yeah, it is closely connected because everything is connected. So one thing that the holographic theory can do is give you superpowers. Now, people say, oh, superpowers, like that's, something in fiction, but humans have always had extraordinary abilities. There's been a ton of things in our reality that we can't explain. So the holographic theory can explain these things because in implicit reality, we're all closely connected. So basically what our mind has done is we've created a type of matrix, right? So this reality that we see is like we're living in the matrix. but it's not created by machines, or it's not created by someone with nefarious purposes. It's just created by our minds so we can get through reality. So we can get up in the morning and find food and find a mate and do all these things that we've evolved to do. And we don't have to deal with the implicit reality of light and energy, which is very difficult to deal with straight up. We can deal with these things that our mind has created for us. So if you can tap into that light and energy and somehow escape slightly from the matrix, you can then do things that Neo can do in the matrix, or you can do things that people may consider extraordinary because you're connected more with reality. So in the book, The Holographic Universe, the author brings up near-death experience. He brings up out-of-body experience. He brings up people with extraordinary physical abilities. He brings up ghosts or spirits. Now, I'm not one that necessarily believes in all that kind of thing, but I do think that when things happen that we can't explain, some people say, oh, it's a ghost, or some people say, oh, it's God, or oh, it's aliens, or it's this or that. Now, we can talk about aliens on another episode, but on this particular episode, in my opinion, a lot of those things that are unexplainable are just us coming in contact with the implicit reality of light and energy, and our brains putting it into a context that we understand better. So if you
I like that. And if we're not going over time on this particular topic, I would add that I'm not going to say that there's no such thing as coincidence, but I am going to say that oftentimes when I am presented with what people would say, oh, it's just a coincidence, I say, no, it's not just a coincidence. There's something else happening here. And I've often, just for the purpose of keeping it simple, because I've never really studied the science or behind it or delved too deeply, I think that our brains or bodies are connected on an electrical level, which sort of lends itself to light and energy along those lines. So maybe I'm saying electrical, what I really mean is light and energy, but sometimes things happen in a way, in a random sequence of events, and it's a little too much to be a coincidence. For me, it's more of like something, an invisible connection, something in the implicit universe that the explicit universe cannot explain. And so instead of just writing it off and being like, oh, that's just an explicit universe coincidence, no, for me, that's an implicit universe connection. And right. It's happened hundreds of times. And it's always an eye-opener for me. I say to them, I sit back and I go, maybe there's more than meets the eye that's happening. I've always believed it. I've felt it deep down. Can I prove it? No. Can I back it up with science? Not yet. I haven't found the right book, or to be perfectly honest, I haven't bothered. It's out there. I just haven't. I'm too busy rereading The Hobbit for the 50th time. That's my own experience of connecting, or the differentiation between explicit universe and implicit universe.
Absolutely. And I think that connection is with most people. Almost everyone I talk to about this subject has some sort of experience like that. So I think that's a common human experience, to have these so-called coincidences that aren't really coincidences. It's just opening up to a broader understanding of the nature of reality. And so I think that's important for everyone to understand. So some people can think about those connections and your broader connections. Some people don't want to think about those sort of things and want to easily explain them off as something else. And so, as I brought up in the first part of the episode, if we can think about those things differently, we can help ourselves be less stressed. We can help ourselves be less unconnected, so to speak. So if I'm not connected to the implicit reality, if I'm not connected to the greater realities of the universe, people can just be a ball of stress, and they can have all sorts of physical issues, and they can have mental issues, and they can have all these issues. And I'm not making light of those issues. We all have our issues. I'm just saying that for me personally, having this broader connection with the implicit reality has helped me with my own physical issues, has helped me with my own mental issues. So I think it's important. It's an important area to study for each of us about the nature of the universe.
Yeah, well, can you implicitly send me some healing vibes and connect the tissues in my shoulder, which have been explicitly destroyed by my own stupidity?
I can actually, and that's an interesting thing, because there's certainly energy healers. I've had contact with some energy healers that heal over a vast distance of space. Now it's interesting, because is that then in our head? Am I making the healing in my head? Is it like a placebo? Like, are they doing something and I'm putting it in my head? Now the question is, does it matter? Since everything is in our head anyway, does it matter if it's in your head, if it's a placebo or not? Does it matter that a placebo is helping you or not? I say no, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's helping you, it's helping you.
Mm-hmm. The ends justify the means.
Right. So this reality that we create in our heads, people say, oh, those healers, they're not doing anything. You're just making it up. Well, that's what reality is. We're making up our own reality in our brains. So if you make up healing, then you're going to heal.
Did you just get back from Kamar-Taj?
What do they do with their hand? It's not Spider-Man, right? It's how does he do it? I don't know.
I don't know. But as much of a joke as that was, they actually broached that subject. If you remember, that movie had a lot of depth, as did the character in the old comic books. But when he can't figure things out scientifically, he goes to that guy who went to Kamar-Taj, who was supposed to learn the mystic arts. And instead, what he did was he learned to heal himself and then went back to regular life. He did it with his brain, with his mind. It was a mind over matter thing, and that is something that, it may not exist for everybody on all levels, on all playing fields, but let's face it, mind over matter on the smallest level, everybody can say there is such a thing as mind over matter. Right. Can we actually work the healing vibe to faster heal myself? Some people would say no. Other people would say yes. That's sort of a question for debate. But we all know that on a simple level, you can master the ability to not itch your mosquito bite, because it's a mind over matter. Everybody can do that. So there's a perfectly small, innocuous example of the very basic version. So it's like, how many iterations can you take that to? It's a question for the ages, and it's a wondrous question. It's a hopeful question. Absolutely. Especially now.
Absolutely. And that's a great point that kind of expands on what I was saying. And this is the holographic, theory. And it's a theory, and it doesn't matter what you think is what's really going on or not. But it's about what you think. It's about what you perceive. It's about what you want to do with your mind. And so that's a good example, is that what the hologram theory says is that you can essentially, if you tap into this implicit reality of light and energy, or if in a more simpler level, if you just tap into your own brain, which is where your reality is, you can do anything. And it's very difficult to do anything. I'm not going to be able to, fly or create these, or create the Kamar-Taj shields or whatever. Now, some people say they can create that, but I don't know if I can do it. And one of the reasons why I don't know if I can do it is because of just what I said. I'm not sure. Just like Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try. So we have these blocks in our head. I don't know if I can do this in reality. Well, then you're not going to do it, because you don't know if you can do it. And so that's hologram theory kind of in a nutshell too. Like, if we're stuck in this matrix that we've created in our mind, that's what we're in. If you can, but if you can take little steps, like you said, if you can take little steps and heal yourself and come in more contact with different things, you can do more than you know. We can perceive more, and we can do more, and we can help each other and help ourselves more than we know. So that is why I call this the Holographic Podcast, because I think there is more to reality than we know. And we'll be talking about that in every subject we talk about, and we'll be talking about it more in the future. But for now, let's move on, because we want to talk about some other stuff too. Let's see. There's a big elephant in the room, Kyle. We're at 2020, and the COVID-19 is basically permeating all of reality and just a huge part of our existence right now. So I want to talk about it a little bit. Luckily, I don't have COVID. Luckily, I think you don't have COVID.
I don't think I do, but we'd never know.
Right. Not very good testing right now, right?
Mm-hmm. And we could be asymptomatic.
That's right. Exactly. So there's a lot of things on social media. There's a lot of things in media. There's a lot of things in our society going on with COVID. I don't want to talk a great deal about exactly what is wrong with everything. I just want to say that our connection with the microbial world, our connection with viruses and bacteria is very important. And it's throughout human history. We need bacteria, we need viruses, we need all these things. This is what makes our biosphere the way it is. And bacteria can be very beneficial, but viruses can be very dangerous. And as time goes on and viruses mutate and change, they can be very dangerous. And it seems through history that there is deadly viruses that happen every once in a while, and it seems like it's every 100 years or a couple hundred years. And so it's inevitable that there will be this virus or there will be other viruses. And I'm not saying you to live your life in fear. I don't live my life in fear. I'm not afraid of the virus, but it's important to understand that it's real and that's something that is a part of our bodies and it's a part of our biosphere. And so I just think that when people post or when people talk about, oh, it's not real, or there's nothing, you shouldn't be afraid, or this and that. Yeah, fine. But you're damn right, viruses are real. They will always be real. They will always be a part of human bodies. They'll always be a part of, as long as humans live on this planet, we will have viruses that attack us. And it's important to understand them. And so I think that we need to understand it and we need to work with it and protect ourselves and move on and live our lives, but not to just think that this can't happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen again and again and again.
Yeah, for sure, Tony. So one of the things I find the most interesting about this, and this is not a particularly original thought, but it's something that's been that I read about, and then it does make sense, is one thing that we absolutely refuse to do throughout history is learn from the past. So, a virus comes through, a big one, it sweeps through, it kills plenty of people, it disrupts everything, and things are really bad. And then about a few years later or decades later or so on and so forth, we just forget about it. And it's almost as if it never happened. Right. Even in the very beginnings of this one, we've never been more connected. We've never had more access to information. Which is both the curse and the cure. So, our connectedness is part of what allows viruses to spread at the rapid fire that they do now. We're a global society. Planes fly every day, boats, shipping containers, all this other stuff. So there's a lot of transmission right there. At the same time, we're armed instantaneously. We were armed with having records of the past and seeing how to deal with this, right? And so, part of what I've wondered about is why we are so disconnected. And when I say we, I'm really talking about our country. I can't speak for the Spanish or the Icelandic or the Latin Americans, the Argentinians. That's a different story everywhere you go. But I know that when we were sort of talking over the ideas for this, you had made mention, and I'm sorry to steal this from if you planned on saying this, part of Japanese culture, they've been wearing masks for years. Before, during, and after any sicknesses. They do it in their everyday life. If somebody is feeling ill, they wear a mask to prevent the spread of their germs to others. And the reason for that is obvious in the science of it. It prevents the spread of germs, but their willingness to do it may not be obvious for other people, but I know it's obvious for you and I because we've studied, at least in a small way, Japanese culture. They are much more group-minded. So even though I value the rugged individualism of America and the United States, and that I think that psyche has value, there's a time and a place when it really is detrimental to us as a country and ultimately to the world. And I think we're living through that right now. I think that this is something we kind of wanted to tackle. And I'm sorry if I just jumped into it by mistake. That was just sort of where it went. But those are two things that I wondered, is that why we have been unable or unwilling to look really closely at how to handle things based on past historical record. And then once we know that, which we do, why have we collectively been so, some people are yes, some people are no, but collectively we have rejected this path to possibly mitigate the what's happening. And here we are in a very dangerous situation, even more so now that it's September. Schools are coming back and schools are opening and schools are closing. So it's like, those are two things that I've wondered, why were we ignorant of things of the past, and knowing what we know, why can't we adapt to move forward? It's baffling to me.
Yeah, it's very difficult to understand how the answers are there, and you can learn so much through history, and you can see, a lot of these answers, you can see other cultures, and yet we just kind of refuse to do it. And I do think, as you mentioned, our rugged individualism, I do think that has a lot to do with where we are right now. And so, how much of that is a good thing? How much of that is a benefit to ourselves? Because ultimately that's what it's about, right? If you're ruggedly individualistic and you have this sense of who you are and what you want to do, and it doesn't matter what other people say or do, and that's who we are as Americans. Why is that? Why do we do that? We do that for ourselves and maybe our families, maybe our communities. But then it gets to a point where if it doesn't help yourself, or it doesn't help your family, or it doesn't help your community, then what is this individualism getting us? It seems to me it's almost like an ego thing. Like it's just making us, giving us a social media handle or a cool picture or this or that. What else is it getting us?
Right, nothing. The other point that I'd like to bring up is that, Americans think, we keep on going back to this, rugged individualism or individualism. That's all fine and good. Those days are long gone. Okay. The only rugged fucking individuals left are the people that grow their food.
Yeah.
And don't need cars with the gasoline and don't need electricity. Okay. If you can make your own power or live from dusk to dawn to dusk, and grow your own food, then you are a rugged individual and you can call it a pandemic or whatever you want. But if you go to the grocery store and do all the things that we do, if you are affected by supply chains and a power outage is a pain in your ass and dangerous because you can't flush your fucking toilet, then fuck you. You're not individual at all. That's the other thing. I'm sorry for being vulgar. We're allowed to be vulgar on the show, right?
Well, yeah, you're fucking right, Kyle, because, you can fucking say whatever you want, but also these people, they have this idea that they're so rugged or they're so tough and they know what's going on, and they are just rough, tough cream puffs. They're just,
they go out and buy steak.
That's right. And you know, even when you look at history, you know, we like to talk about the good old days or the ruggedness of people in the past, and they weren't that rugged either. You know, there's certainly some people, I'm taking nothing away from people like you said, who really work hard for what they have. But a lot of people in society for many, many years have relied on each other. As humans, that's what we do. We're social creatures. We rely on each other. And so it's interesting. I just read this interesting thing, kind of off topic, but a good example. Like in the Old West, people say, "Oh, these cowboys, and they were so tough, and they went and had gunfights and stuff like that, and they weren't that tough." And you know, most cities, most towns in the Old West actually didn't let you take a gun in. You didn't go in there and have gunfights. You went in there and you went and you got your food and your water that they helped you with, and you put your gun aside and you put your ego aside, and then you got on your horse and you kept going. So I think we romanticize, and a lot of these people too, they romanticize the way that it used to be, or they romanticize the way that society should be. But
you know, that's a really good example. And I would say that that's got a really valuable parallel or allegory, you might even say. You know, if you could not prove that, because I'm taking what you just said as fact, you read it in a that is factually solid. That's what cowboys by and large did. Imagine if we could apply that to the whole question of whether or not you should have to wear a mask, or it's a violation of your liberties or your civil freedoms, or all this stuff, your freedoms or your civil liberties. Like if the gunfighters were sober enough in their mind to say, I can't survive without going to the goods and sundry market for feed, pork fat, whatever, you know, grease or saddle soap or whatever. And to do that, I have to take my gun off for 5 minutes, and then I can put my gun right back on when I go outside. Isn't that a perfect example, a parallel of why people should say, for the better good, I'm going to maybe just wear a mask while I go to the grocery store. I'm not going to complain. And then I'm going to go back to my car and I can just take my mask off. Like, what's wrong with that? Why is it such a hurdle?
Absolutely. And I think it's been throughout history. There's a lot of examples throughout history. The one I was reading was I believe it was somewhere in Kansas City. And there is these places that you think of as the Old West, but they had these strict rules that if you wanted to go into town, you had to abide by these rules. And they did, because they knew if they didn't go into town and get those supplies and they went out back in the road, they were screwed. So they followed the rules. And there's a lot of examples throughout history that show that. Now, I don't know about every town in the Old West. I'm sure there were towns that didn't have those rules. So I'm sure that someone could find anecdotal evidence that says you're full of shit, and that's fine. But I think for the most part, if you look at history, people, they did do those certain things. So they lived as a society to help one another. And it wasn't just a free for all. And I think that's throughout most history that you can find those examples. And I'm going to check it out so I can find some more examples.
Virgil Earp, dude. Virgil Earp, Tombstone. Whoa, calm down, people. No one's saying you can't own a gun. No one's saying you can't carry a gun. We're just saying you can't carry a gun in town. And then everybody freaks out.
That's a fantastic quote. And on that note, I'd like to move on from COVID, and I'd like to talk about another movie. We're going to do a recurring theme here on the Holographic Podcast. We're going to talk about Conan the Barbarian and the amazing things that come out of the mouth of Arnold and was written into that movie. Kyle, do you have a particular quote that you would like to share with us?
Oh my God, you just sprung this on me.
Or would you like me to start?
Yeah, you start. Well,
now, I'm just gonna go straight up, you know, our go-to here, because Conan the Barbarian, however you want to pronounce it, he meets Subutai, right? And Subutai thinks that he's going to eat some food or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote. Now, Kyle probably remembers the exact quote, but Conan the Barbarian, he looks at Subutai and he says, "And who says you will?"
Well, you got to give him some context, Tony. So Conan the Barbarian comes out of the shack, right? And
the witch. There's a witch.
The witch, yup. And Subutai is in chains against the wall. And he says, food, give me food. Let me die not in hunger, but in combat. And then Conan says, who are you? And he says, dinner for Wolf, because he's chained up. And then he goes and he pleads with him, and he says, I have not eaten for days. And then Conan says,
and who says you will?
And who says you will? And he was fucking with him. But it's so true. I don't know what's true about it.
Who are you?
Who are you? Long story short here, I think one of the lessons that I took away from that is, if we're going to try and connect these with life lessons, like you said, opportunity knocks, man. Your best friend, your worst enemy are right around the corner. May as well make him your best friend, So even though at that moment, Conan says, and who says you will? Like fuck you. I'm not giving you, you're screwed, and I'm just going to let you be screwed. He ends up, using the softer part of his heart. He frees Subutai, and what happens? A great friendship ensues. And then there's the awesome soundtrack where they're running across the steppe, like hunting, and it's like really good music, and it's awesome.
Now let's save some for the next show, Kyle.
Okay.
Because we could just talk forever about this. But you brought up a good point. Conan the Barbarian has a lot of power in that moment. And does he use that power lightly? And does he let his ego take over and just chop Subutai up or give him a kick in the face and keep going? No, he thinks about things. He thinks, he takes the time and he thinks about it, and he gets this great buddy in Subutai. So sometimes we have power and sometimes we have these opportunities, and you got to take the time and use your opportunities.
I fully agree.
So we don't have a lot of time left, but not real quick, as quick as we can, I want to talk about the second elephant in the room, since this is late 2020, which is politics. Obviously, politics are this other thing that completely pervades our life. And we're going to talk about it more on our next show too. And we'll probably talk about it on most shows. We're not going to talk about politics the whole time, but I think it's important to talk about them a little bit and to talk about what's going on politically, because when you ignore politics, some people say, oh, I don't even want to think about it, or I want to do something completely different, because it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to think about, but it's so important. And it's important because it affects every single one of us. These political decisions are affecting every single one of us. And so I think it's important to talk about. So politics right now is, in my opinion, toxic. We have a toxic political environment in the United States, and especially on social media and in the media, we have this, we have these divisions, and we have a lot of things that are dividing us and turning us against each other, thinking about one side and the other side. As the show goes on, you'll find out my opinions more about those different sides. But right now, I just want to say that, and I'll let Kyle talk about his political opinions, because he's got a lot of political opinions. But all I want to say right now is that I think, in reality, as Americans and as humans, because not just with Americans, as Americans, but also with people of other countries, I think we all want to live in harmony. I think that we all get along pretty well. And I think we all have pretty close opinions about how we want to live our lives. We want to be, we want to have security as far as food, and security as healthcare, and security and all these different things. And when they try and divide us and turn us against each other, I think that that's not reality. I think reality is that if your neighbor disagrees with you, or if someone from a different country disagrees with you, you can still be friends with them and agree to be good humans to each other. And there's certainly extremists. And those extremists, I'm not saying, oh, let's just take those extremists in the fold and those extremists can live in harmony. No, if you're an extremist, then we have problems. But most humans are not extremists. And so the divisions that are here to divide us, I think, are mostly for profit and mostly for power gain and political gain. But I don't think that there are a lot of real divisions in reality. I think in our world, we're closer than we think. Kyle, why don't you talk a little bit about your political?
Well, I would say that I think you make a really valid point. I think that if you are neighbors with somebody and your political ideologies are divergent, I think that there are ways to get around that. I mean, I think that there's probably lots of examples of neighbors who are really adversarial in real life just as much as online now. But I know, as a personal anecdotal example, I was definitely ideologically uh, polarized, opposite from my former neighbor. And yet we shared enough things in common about the way we ran our common border property line that somehow we managed to survive just fine. The one thing I would say, though, is that I also agree with your, rejection of extremism. It's not the way you want to go. I also reject centrism, though. I also reject moderate. In a lot of situations, I reject the moderate viewpoint these days because things are getting to a boiling point, and I really do. People have said to me, "Don't use right or wrong. You're right and I'm wrong." I can't help it all the time. I can help it sometimes, but I'm sorry. There are things that are transpiring right now that I think are really, really wrong. They are not 2020. They are not enlightened. They do not reflect the values that we set down in the Constitution or that we hold to be in ourselves, these lofty ideals, which are not really that lofty. They're very, very basic. So when I see that happening and people are like, well, you can't just utterly reject because of, well, yes, I can, and I will. The thing about also that I heard you say was that a lot of people are sort of sitting on the sidelines. They're not overly vocal, which is fine because a lot of times progress is not made online. It's a really difficult platform to actually. It's mostly wheel spinning. It's no real forward momentum, which is a sad thing. I think that a lot of that is because the platforms are misused and because the platforms are themselves somewhat corrupt in the sense that they're feeding you. The algorithms they're feeding you plays to your preset narratives, and that's not good either. But I think Elie Wiesel once said, "Silence only aids the aggressor." Elie Wiesel was the author of Night, the book Night, which was a story of he was a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and his quote, and this may not be word for word, but like I said, it's silence only aids the aggressor. Okay, so if you sit on the side, you might think of yourself as being not involved. I'm Switzerland. Well, Switzerland is not always the best thing to be. Case in point, World War II. Okay, so if you're silent and on the side and you're not choosing sides, that means that you're letting one person or peoples take advantage of the other. Is it that way all the time, black and white in every situation? Is there never a time you should sit on the side? No, of course not. But I think that people need to realize that, and I wish that we could do things a little different. I think that social media is like I said, it's a tough place to do it because it allows people to kind of set up these walls and make these viciously aggressive statements without having any consequences. It also allows people to fire things back and forth in such a rapid fashion that nothing ever gets done, which is part of what I think is the misuse of the platform. I love debating on Facebook because I feel like I bring a certain level of seriousness and thought to it, and I don't respond right away, and my mind can be changed. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. I apologize for that. There's just so much to unpack there.
There's a ton to unpack there, and we're going to talk about it more on the next episode. And I totally agree with you. And about being a centrist, like I agree with you when I'm talking about, getting along with your fellow human. I'm talking about on a human level. On a political level, I 100% agree with you. You have to have a political stance and a political opinion, and you have to back it up with some sort of factual information. And the idea that everyone's opinion is valid, I think is not valid. Everyone's opinion is not valid. Everyone is entitled to an opinion, and that's the difference. You're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to think that your opinion is valid if you're full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're basing it on false narratives, if you're basing it on this bullshit that's spewing out of these networks, I don't want to name a specific one, Fox News. If you're basing it on, this information, your opinion is not valid. You're full of shit. And I think it's important that we call each other out as being full of shit. But I can, if I'm having a beer with someone and I say you're full of shit and this is why, we can still have a beer. But if someone's an extremist and they say, I don't care what you think, and this is going on, and these people are, and these people are blah, 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 and we need to do this, and I'm going to do this, and they become an extremist, then no, I don't want to have a beer with you. Because if you have no open mind for that sort of thing, then I don't think it's valid to have a beer with them. But that, again, that's an extremist. That's extremism. And that's
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, it's like, a lot of times people should just ask themselves a question, and it's hard to do because it's hard to ask yourself questions, but it's like, am I supporting like a sequence of action that could be construed as being like bullyish or boorish behavior? And I think that is really, really prevalent in our society now. It always has been. The pecking order does not go away.
right.
It's one of the most awful lessons we learn as children, and it doesn't stop when we enter our teens, 20s, and every decade after that. You're walking down the street, mild-mannered, there's totally a chance that you could come across somebody who wants to do you real harm for no real reason whatsoever. You always have to watch out. And that's a shame. So when you back it up a little bit and take away from that random on the street interaction, I feel like one of the things that I grapple with the most is how people think that they're right in embracing these actions and ideologies in which other people suffer.
Right.
And I never really understood that. Granted, I know some people be like, well, look at you and your little straw hat and your beautiful plastered room and your fancy little Vermont town with a bunch of fucking hippies. And that's all true. But there's a lot of community mindedness that goes on here. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that activity is limited. I do not take part in that activity. I reject it 100%. And I don't understand how people can embrace it, which is what's happening. People are embracing boorish, insular, isolated activity and ideology, which is just, It's fucking toxic, man.
It is. It's toxic. For the folks at home, Kyle is in Vermont. I am in Colorado, just so you're aware.
We're both super woke.
So we're going to talk about this on another episode, but real quick, just at the end of this, with political bullshit, but it's important. How are we going to fix this? Like, how does this get fixed? And a follow-up of that question is, can it be fixed in the United States of America?
Are you asking me a question? Before we just move on or sign off or whatever's coming next, excuse me. I think that as we start to move down this road at some point, I think your father may be a valued guest star.
No way.
No way. He's too radical.
Talk about extremism.
Very, but you know what? Excuse me. I'm having a little problem here.
No problem.
Just a thought. Sorry. I didn't mean to.
It's a good thought. We'll see who we're going to bring on the show. We're going to bring a lot of fun people on the show. So my question was, and it's a yes or no. We're going to talk about it at a different time. It's simple yes or no. Can the United States of America be fixed politically? Yes or no?
Yes.
All right. Kyle says yes. I say no. Perfect setup for the next debate. So we're going to finish the show here on our favorite recurring theme, which is ripping on our friends. So we have a platform. We like to talk. Why not? We're going to rip on our friends. We're going to rip on them real good. And we're going to just pick people who we know and just rip on them. So this week we have a very special friend. He's a great, fantastic fellow. His name is JG. Kyle, can you rip on JG a little bit for me, please?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I can, but where do I start? Which story do you want me to tell?
To tell the story, what we were discussing before about how he tells a story with zero payoff.
Oh, yeah. So, right. Yeah. So one of the things that Jay loves to do, so Jay's got a thing where it's like he can't sit still. He can't be quiet. He always has to be saying something. There's no such thing as like a pause in conversation. There's no such thing as a natural segue. If there was a natural segue, it's immediately made unnatural by the fact that less than 0.5 seconds has passed. Nobody even got a chance to breathe or digest the information, and all of a sudden he's into the next thing. So we just finished up a conversation about something, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, and by the way, and then he just goes rip shit into the next story. And a lot of times these things have come out so fast, he'll go on this long thing and you're sitting there and you've already wanted to go to the bathroom 5 minutes ago, because that's what segues are about. You finish a conversation, you get a chance to breathe, drink, walk away, say, see you later. I got to go get lunch. I'm hungry. The child is crying, any of those things. But JG, he just pulls you right back.
Sucks you right in.
So he sucks you right back in, and then he starts telling a story. And it's going and going.
He makes it interesting.
And there's something happening, and you think that there's something happening, and then all of a sudden you get to the end, and it turns out that there's nothing really happening.
Nothing. Zero.
Nothing.
Zip.
And so you just wasted another 5 minutes. Your bladder is still full. Your child is still crying. The line for lunch is now twice as long, and here you are back at square one. And if you don't just put your hand out and say, stop, he'll do it a third time and a fourth time and a fifth time. I don't have any real examples of the stories. And it's also gotten to the point where long ago I've learned to be like, you know what, Jay, thanks, but no thanks. I got to get lunch, or my bladder's full, or my child, which I don't have, is crying. I'll just lie. But yeah, that's one of his natural talents, is to take something, a real, just to waste time.
And I remember it always got to me, because I was expecting something really, really good, because he is a good storyteller. And so if he put his talents toward actually telling a useful story, he had some storytelling talents. So he would start off so great, and then it would end with literally zero payoff. And I would inside, I'm thinking like, why would you do this to me? And I was upset. I was upset that it had zero payoff.
It doesn't help that he wakes up at 5 a.m. and calls me to do that. He's like, oh, I was just on my way to work, man. I figured I'd give you a call. It's like, you know what, asshole? I wasn't on my way to work. Thank you very much.
All right. That has been ripping on your friends. Next week, we're going to pick a new friend to rip on. And that concludes our show for today. We hope that you will join us next time. I thank you for joining us. Kyle, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
I am your host, Tone D. Salty Dog, signing off. Thank you, folks.